Not Quite Right features discussions that are unfiltered and uncensored and may include themes that are inappropriate for younger listeners. Also, I swear a lot.
Something doesn't seem quite right.
Welcome to Not Quite Right. My name's Ed.
And I'm Amanda.
So this is the second Daredevil episode for the January 2025 round of the Not Quite Right prize for flash fiction. And the prompts this round were the word prompt, ring, the action prompt, opening a door, and the anti-prompt, break the rule, write what you know. So as a reminder, our Daredevils are people who have intentionally signed up for the privilege and the pleasure of being eviscerated.
The dubious
honour on the podcast. Our Daredevil today has come back for a third time. So we absolutely love you, Holly.
Big fans.
Holly Sadowski from Kansas. Not to be confused with Holly Sadowski from Philadelphia.
Ooh.
Who we Googled you, Holly, and...
Yeah, like when all this started coming out, right, we're having our Twitter beef and whatever, I'm like, right, I need to stalk this woman a little bit. I need to find out a little bit more about what her deal is, right? I want to know who I'm dealing with here. And yeah, did some Googling and was briefly like scared out of my mind. So there is a Holly Sadowski in Philadelphia. Actually, I'm not sure that she was accused of murdering the person that she stole from, but stealing the Social Security benefits of an invalid woman who she was supposed to be caring for. And I'm like, is this the person I'm having Twitter beef with? Like, do I need to wind it back a little bit?
So the headline I have here is Philadelphia woman charged with stealing Social Security disability benefits of homicide victim found buried under her basement. So Holly Sadowski, not this Holly Sadowski, we should make that absolutely clear, but another Holly Sadowski had stolen $100,000 worth of benefits. So when we first Googled...
Look, and there's a question mark over whether she's the one who killed this person. I mean, either she killed them or she disposed of a body after they died, really. Like, they're the two plausible options. And I'm like, I'm riling this person up online, like...
And so, of course, when we first Googled this and we found out more like, oh, shit, is this person who has bought a Daredevil, are they a serial killer? And we looked at the pictures and they're not that different.
No, they looked kind of similar. There's some real striking similarities in certain photos between Holly Sadowski, the serial killer, and Holly Sadowski, the serial offender here at Not Quite Right. And it took a while. It took some frantic Googling to kind of unpack, like, is this the same person? Like, you would think if you're going to be the same person that you would assume a different identity, like not the same identity to hide. But no, of course, we did later discover that it was someone else.
Well, we should be very clear that the Holly Sadowski who enters the Not Quite Right prize is lovely.
Yes.
And would never hurt a fly.
Would never.
And I'm sure you Googling your own name and being confronted with that kind of thing is not a fun experience. So.
And look, we shouldn't make light of it, to be honest. No. Someone actually died. This is very serious, but that was not what I was expecting.
No,
that was not on my bingo card. And I'm very, very glad that it worked out for the best.
But the Holly Sadowski we will be talking about today has entered the Not Quite Right prize several times and featured as a Daredevil twice before, which is a record. She's the record holder. And she's also got some results to show for it as well. One long listing and one coveted dishonourable mention. That's for her story Johnson & Johnson in October.
And I have to say it's been very, very fun reading Holly's stories and chatting with Holly online as well. I know that Holly recently presented at a summit.
Yes.
A writing summit. And her topic was kind of like being brave and bold and putting yourself out there, which of course she has repeatedly, and she's clearly an expert in that by now. And I sat in on that. You sat in on that as well? Yeah, and we had a listen and she did really well. And it's so nice to see Holly and our other participants as well, like stretching themselves too. Like, I guess it's kind of like the flash fiction comp is your gateway drug. But, you know, everybody's got their different aspirations of where they want to take their writing talents and what they want to do with them. And I think the idea of Holly spreading the virus of boldness and bravery in writing is really exciting to me. And I'm very proud of you, Holly. I think that's really cool. And you did a great job. And I hope you yourself inspired some other people as well.
Absolutely. So Holly's story this round, I think she's trying to kind of break that mold or break away from her dishonourable mention. She's trying to be good this time around. So she's gone with a religious theme. The title of her story this round is actually the longest title that we received, and it's Jesus et al. Hereby demand Miss Paula Green to cease and desist all invocations of Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and Big Daddy God.
And I feel it's pertinent to mention right now that it is hot as hell in here.
Yeah.
Like literally.
It's really hot.
I'm drinking wine here because I know Holly set me up. Like we say she's been good this round, but she's set me up with an accent to do. And we all know how good I am at accents,
you're
right?
pretty shit.
Yeah. Thank you. So I've been drinking wine to try and like get myself ready. But like then immediately sweating it out.
Yeah.
So it's completely useless.
We're recording this on the first day of autumn, but it's over 30 degrees Celsius. I have no idea what that is in Fahrenheit.
No, and it's got to be hotter than that in this room. It's got to be pushing 40 in here. So I'm sweating. So I'm feeling the pressure from the heavens, and sincerest apologies in advance for the accent. I do not want to offend any Southerners here. I am doing my best. With blonde hair teased to the heavens, Paula smooths her skirt and glances at her speech one last time before grabbing the mic and stepping on stage. The crowd erupts, drowning out the clicking of her red-soled heels. She raises her arm to quiet them. My fellow Christians. Her shrill twang echoes through the megachurch sound system. It's time we bring Jesus back to this country. Heat pulls at her center as the congregation roars, the adoration and validation arousing her more than any man ever has. Paula points a well-manicured talon at her feet. Where I walk is holy ground. Big Daddy God speaks directly through me. A lone spotlight, as though from God himself, shines on Paula, the cheers crescendoing to a fever pitch. If my intentions aren't sincere, she cries, may God strike me down. A clap of thunder resounds, followed by a pop of the lights short-circuiting. An eerie silence descends on the once raucous crowd. Paula taps the mic. Hello? Her voice drained of the self-righteous fire and brimstone. With the sanctuary cast in darkness, she carefully makes her way off stage toward the light emanating from the crack under her dressing room door. When she opens the door, it's no longer her dressing room. Instead, she finds a modest office with a swarthy man sitting behind a desk, looking at Paula expectantly. Who the hell are you, and what happened to my dressing room? She asks tartly. The man's lips twitch beneath his beard. Is that any way to speak to St. Peter? Paula gasps. But you're... Not white? Yeah, no one in the Bible is if you paid any attention. She takes a deep breath, channeling all of her Karen powers. Listen here, Peter. I demand a meeting with Big Daddy God immediately. St. Peter chuckles. They hate being called that. They? God is non-binary, he states, as though it was the most obvious fact. And they want nothing to do with whatever it is you're doing down there. Why, I'm just trying to bring Jesus to the American people. Peter looks down at his notes. You threatened to call ICE on an employee at McDonald's because your Diet Coke was flat. He glances back up. Also, Jesus had me draw up a cease and desist letter for you. Paula takes the missive and slumps into a chair. Does this mean I'm not going to heaven? That remains to be seen. We can't have you disturbing the residents. Tears run down Paula's face, streaking her cheeks with mascara. I can't go to hell, she wails. What will my followers think? Peter taps the papers, clipping them together. Nothing. They'll be doing hard labour for Lucifer if they keep listening to you. Does this mean I'm getting a second chance? She sniffles. Unlike you lot, we actually follow the forgiveness principle. But cut the crap, Paula. Bless you. He presses a button and Paula falls through the floor, her shriek loud enough to be heard. In heaven and earth. Amen.
Oh my God, it's so hot down here.
It's really hot and I feel very uncomfortable. Fuck. So thanks for that. I love that I just went hard on Paula's accent there. And then
I think you did a good job.
Thank you. But I completely ignored St. Peter's accent because fuck
he's
knows what
Australian,
that's meant to be. Everyone in heaven is Australian, really. You go up there and you get anointed and you become
Australian. It's like
Australian.
when you go on holiday and there's Australians everywhere.
Oh, so thank you for the challenge, Holly. I actually found that fun. I don't know if that's the wine seeping out of my pores in this sweatbox, but yeah, that was good fun.
And Holly's actually left us a voicemail message, so we'll play that now.
Hi, Ed and Amanda. This is Holly Sadowski from Kansas, third-time Daredevil because there is something wrong with me. And I wrote the story, Jesus et al. Hereby demand of Ms. Paula Green to cease and desist all invocations of Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and Big Daddy God. The January contest came around, I can't remember if it was before or after the inauguration, but it was certainly on my mind and feeling a little helpless about the whole situation. So I used your contest as a way to channel my frustrations, and this is the result. I hope you enjoy, and I did behave myself this time.
So yeah, as we mentioned, Holly is doing this Daredevil thing for the third time now, setting a record there. And like you said it, Holly, not us, but maybe there is something wrong with you.
And so this challenge was actually, I think it was a few days after the inauguration, right? Which was on the 20th from memory. A few days after, and it was on everyone's mind. And I think it was a theme, a little bit of a theme. And I guess, we spoke about Des Veer's story last episode. Kind of has a similar vibe.
Yeah, and not to get political, like I have very strong political views myself, and that's by the by, like who gives a shit what I think, basically. As an Aussie, we don't even have to have strong opinions for or against, but we still do. I think, regardless of your political leanings, like it's a difficult time right now. For a lot of people, like there's a lot of uncertainty, like whether you're for or against, the uncertainty can be scary. It can be exciting for some and scary for others. And getting caught in this 24-hour news cycle is like an incredibly relatable thing. I know lots of people who have become pretty down about it, to be honest. My approach is to ignore it because it's not my country.
You say that, but we've got our own elections.
We do, and we have our own self-dubbed, I think, Aussie Trump here in Australia.
Well, he's explicitly said he wants to be the Aussie Trump.
Did he say it? I wasn't sure if it was the media, because again, I don't engage, so I don't actually know. But, it's a challenge we're facing everywhere, and it's not really for me to say. Like, I know there are people in America who enter our comp who are pro-Trump. But like acknowledging that this is a difficult time for a lot of people, and there are a lot of feelings, there are a lot of challenges that are coming up, especially, if you're someone who's losing your job or someone who's losing rights or whatever it might be that's happening at the moment. It's happening at a really fast pace. And so I think it's interesting that flash fiction can be like a bit of a haven for people in this world, like fiction in general. And we see it time and again. Like if we go back to, I've seen shirts that say make George Orwell fiction again and all that sort of stuff. But, since forever, humans have like expressed these fears in fiction and like taken them to their extreme. And if we look at, Handmaid's Tale and all that sort of stuff, which we sort of talked about in Des's episode as being a bit of a theme there. And I do think it's interesting. I do think that flash is a way that we can express ourselves, whether it's for, whether it's against, like whatever it is that you're feeling. It could be completely unrelated, of course, just zoomed in right on your life. And I think that's great. I think channeling your emotions is a really powerful way to approach flash fiction because it does come across.
It can be a risk as well, right? Especially if you're
true.
taking a side or a position in a story and, embedding your own political views into a story, the person who's reading it may not receive it the same way.
That's true. And there would be plenty of people who don't, right? Like I guess in this case, Holly knows her audience and probably it's less risky in that regard. But yeah, you can really divide people with your fiction too. And that can be really powerful. You can choose to share your view. And that's really what this is about, right? Like speaking your truth. And we talked about that, like with this anti-prompt, it's all about authenticity. So the anti-prompt was break the rule, write what you know. And the idea of the rule of write what you know is to be authentic, to like communicate your truth in a way that someone else reading that can pick that up. And whether they agree or not, there's a connection that's formed. And I think tapping into those real powerful emotions that you have for whatever reason, whatever it is that you might be feeling, is a way to like shortcut that and say, look, this is me on the page and like you can agree or not, but this is my truth, you know, and regardless of how you place in a competition, and Holly did not long list in this particular round, but regardless of that, to be able to say like, I put myself out there and I made a connection, I think is a really powerful thing. I think that's a win every time.
For sure. But Holly did give us some more insight into her response there to the anti-prompt, so we'll just read out her brief explanation. So she said, with respect to the anti-prompt, there is the obvious, I have no idea what I'm doing, as none of us do. And I also added that the main character wrote a speech that she knows nothing about, and I also wanted to leave the ending a little open-ended for one last layer for the anti-prompt. So, yeah, a few different approaches there.
So should we go through it?
Yeah, so let's go through the story and we'll start with maybe the title, which again was the longest title we've received. What do you think about the title?
It's very similar to Des's, which was the last Daredevil episode where it's setting up a hermit crab. So I don't think I explained hermit crab in Des's episode, and we have talked about it before, but a hermit crab fiction, it's a term that is used to describe a story that is told through some other piece of writing. Yeah. So it's like the shell is the piece of writing and the story goes inside that. So, you know, classics are letters, right? We have epistolary fiction more generally, and we've talked about some of that before where, you know, the story is told through letters between people and that sort of thing. But in flash fiction, you have the freedom to have other things.
It's usually more specific, like, you know, the examples we've given before. It could be a story told as a shopping list or a recipe or that kind of thing.
Yeah, and Nicholas Marconi, who has entered our comp before and who has in fact won the New York City Midnight competition before, I believe for Microfiction 100, I think. Very short fiction. He loves that format and he's done it in a range of ways, and I love to see the different creative ways he's done it. I know one was like a review, like an online review of a hotel, and the story was told through that. And it's cool, right? It's a really cool format. And so anyway, that's the explanation of what a hermit crab fiction is. Now, a title like this sets up a hermit crab fiction because it's presenting it like the title of a letter. Yep. Jesus et al. Hereby demand Ms. Paula Green to cease and desist. It's a cease and desist letter, but what follows is not actually a cease and desist letter. So like I did with Des, I would challenge that. I mean, the cease and desist letter is mentioned. Yes. It is mentioned later in the story, but it's told in prose. It's a story. And so I guess, like, it's a question. It's not like I'm saying there's a right or wrong. I'm just saying, does that fit? And maybe that's setting us up for something that's not really there. So it's a bit like a bait and switch. But also it is interesting. And it is a way of kind of hinting at the comedic tone of the piece.
I mean, I agree. And for the same reasons that we spoke about in the last episode. I'd also just, I think maybe generally challenge long titles. They can read quite well on the page, but they're a bit of a stumble when we try to read them out on the podcast. And I think you can do more with like a more pithy title. And Holly's last title was The Tale of Johnson & Johnson. You know, that's quite a pithy kind of hook. And it was a clever little pun. And I think that was a standout title as well for its reference back to the story. This one's a lot more of a mouthful.
Yeah, and look, I don't know, I guess probably we're exposing our bias here. Both Ed and I are a bit anti-long title, and not necessarily for a good reason. That's just personal preference. So make of that what you will. We have an article on the website all about titles and different ways to make an effective title. So there are many different ways. There's not one answer to this question, and this is one way, right? It's got our attention for sure. So that's a tick. Does it match the story? Maybe not. But, you know, again, that's so subjective.
All right. But the title's not usually going to be the determining factor as whether you make it into the long list or not. So let's get into the story proper. And we open with blonde hair teased to the heavens, Paula smooths her skirt and glances at her speech one last time before grabbing the mic and stepping on stage. The crowd erupts, drowning out the clicking of her red-soled heels. She raises her arm to quiet them. So I think what this does really well, I really like that little hint in the opening half a sentence there with blonde hair teased to the heavens. I guess setting up one of the themes there. And
yeah, that's very Poe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Single effect.
And yeah, it throws us in there very quickly. We get a named character.
Love it.
You know, I think that we could have maybe mentioned the setting being a mega church in that opening sentence. It comes a few sentences later. But I always say, like, when you try to open a story, what you're trying to do is put a picture in the reader's mind of where they are and what's happening. And the more you can paint that picture clearly so that the rest follows smoothly, the better. Because what you don't want to do is set a picture and then have that picture change a couple of sentences later, because they might picture, I don't know, a teacher talking to an auditorium or something, and then later on, oh, actually, no, it's a church.
No, I agree with you. I do think the title helps there in this case, and so therefore tick on the title, because we've already been set up to assume that this character has some things to say about God, and where do we normally say those things? In a church. And the idea that she's sort of got this teased hair and she's about to give a speech, like, for me, those dots are connected by that point. But Ed makes a good point. Like, it is helpful to, I guess, very quickly establish, like, where are we in time and space? And you do that later. So really that needs to just happen first. Because for anyone where those dots aren't connected, they're going to go, oh, hang on, sorry. And it's going to sort of break their visual. And I don't think that's really an issue in this story. I didn't find that to be a problem, but I think that's a good piece of advice, generally speaking. Like, just get your character, get your setting, get your conflict, like, and a hook. Like, it's a lot. It is a lot to ask, but that's pretty much what you're trying to set up very, very quickly in the opening paragraph or sentences.
So I think maybe a piece of information that is missing in this introduction, what I would have liked to know is a little bit more about the why. Like, we know that she's this pastor, essentially, at a mega church making this speech. But just a little bit more of, like, why now? Why here in this specific situation? Why is this event
like culminated here? Yeah.
Like, what's the speech going to be about? Is it just her regular Sunday speech, or is there something special about this? And one of the reasons why I say that is that there is the inciting event here is the fact that she says,
smite me.
Basically throws up the challenge, and then the challenge is accepted. But I was a little bit unsure what she was so defensive about in that situation. Like, was it this speech given in response to something? Yeah,
and like, jumping ahead a little bit, I guess, that's something I would challenge about this, that the speech that we actually see, like the bits that she says, are pretty tame. There's not much that's like offensive or like over the top in what she actually says. She says, my fellow Christians, it's time we bring Jesus back to this country. She says, where I walk is holy ground. Big Daddy God speaks directly through me. Now, Big Daddy God is to me, right? And that's clearly how Holly feels about it as well. So that's an issue, and that's what this is all about with the title. But I would have liked to have seen a bit more of what is the speech. Like, what is she saying that's offensive, that is like deeply wrong and unchristian or what have you, that then St. Peter's like, right, enough's enough. Yeah, and it's the stakes basically of the scenario she's in, because she's very confident. She's got the crowd on her side. What are the stakes there? And she does throw up that challenge, but it's unclear why she would even need to challenge herself. Yeah, like she's saying, oh, basically smite me if I'm not telling the truth. But she hasn't said much yet. Like, apart from Big Daddy God speaks through me, which is clearly the crux of it. Yeah. But I guess there wasn't enough around that to make that sort of feel offensive, apart from the actual term itself. Yeah. So I would have liked to maybe have saved some words for that. And look, just jumping back again, because I'd love to just delve into the opening a little bit more. And I do think it's a great opening, right? And I think the title and the opening together hooked me. I'm like, this is going to be something that I want to read. But if we want to get into the nitty gritty, I think there are things you could do to actually lift it again. Yep. So blonde hair teased to the heavens, I love, because Poe, right? We're talking about the heavens. This is great. And obviously the blonde hair teased up, like we're getting a vision here of our character. Fantastic. We've got Paula named. Fantastic. Tick, tick, tick. So many ticks. Now, the next part of that sentence is Paula smooths her skirt and glances at her speech one last time before grabbing the mic and stepping on stage. Now, this is your opportunity to show Paula in what we call a characteristic moment. Okay, so a characteristic moment is for a character, like what defines them? What is the thing that they would do that is so them that you say it and immediately like I've painted a whole picture of that person. Now, smoothing her skirt and glancing at her speech, while that's setting up a little bit visually and also, okay, she's about to give a speech, which is good. So I'm not really questioning that aspect. But more, is this Paula? We want Paula to be this kind of like, she's Big Daddy God, right? Like she thinks she knows best. I mean, I like the point in the next line about her red-soled shoes, which implies, you know, the money and maybe a little bit of hypocrisy there around her Christianity. But like smoothing your skirt, to me, it's not compelling enough. I want to get to know Paula really quickly. So this is real next level stuff. Like I'm not saying this is a problem. It's visual. It's phrased well. I'm not questioning any of that. But what I think you could challenge yourself to do is think about Paula's stepped on stage, right? And if this was a play, what does she say and do that immediately the whole audience is like, I've got you pegged? Because, of course, we have few words to work with. And the smoothing her skirt, it's like she's nervous, actually. And I'm not sure that's the character we want to present. I feel like the character we want to present is someone who's overconfident, who actually tosses her speech cards aside because God is actually speaking directly through her. She doesn't need a speech. That's who I'm picturing later. So I guess I would just like that set up somehow in that brief opening.
And I did want to add a little bit to this as well because I feel like that character of Paula here, what you've done really well, Holly, is latch onto an existing archetype of a character.
Yeah.
It's someone who, you know, you can point to and we all know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
We all know who that person is and what they're like. And I think that's really important as well in flash fiction because you need to paint that picture really quickly. But I think what comes next is then turning that archetype into a unique and compelling character. Like develop something about them that is unique to them a little bit more so you can kind of put that person into focus and make that person more compelling. And I think one detail that you insert there that helps paint that picture is that the adoration and validation arousing her more than any man ever has.
I was going to say that, right? Like that comes a little bit later and that is such a hook.
Yeah.
Like that's so good. And I would have loved to have seen that right in the first sentence just about or like right in that first paragraph.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how you visually show that or how you make that a characteristic moment right up front, but I think that's a detail that kind of sets her apart from what you would say most megachurch pastors are all about, you know?
No, I think you're right. I think that's the thing. That's the thing. Get rid of the smoothing of the skirt. Bring that right up front. Like this is exciting to her in a way that's a little bit unique. And so we've set up our classic character and then we've gone with why they different. And I think that would be like chef's kiss, like perfect start.
All right. So a lone spotlight as though from God himself shines on Paula. The cheers crescendoing to a fever pitch.
So I love this lone spotlight. I think that works as this like divine moment and it really fits within that pose single effect kind of thing. So I do really love that. I would have liked to, I think, maybe seen that expressed more like we'll go there, the show don't tell kind of thing. Because it says a lone spotlight as though from God himself shines on Paula. And I feel like that's a little bit in your face.
It's a bit telling.
Yeah, like we get the spotlight. Like I don't think we need that extra little bit. Like maybe give your reader a little bit of credit and just give them that visual and let them just connect those dots. Like you've already set all of that up for us. You're talking about God, you know, you've set up with the title. I think that works on its own. And so I would challenge you, I guess, to maybe just not necessarily fill in all those blanks there.
Yeah. Okay. And so then we go into that pivotal moment where she challenges God and may he strike me down. And basically he does. There's a clap of thunder resounds followed by a pop of the lights short-circuiting. An eerie silence descends on the once raucous crowd. So this is a bit of like magic that's happening here or divine intervention. The description here of with the sanctuary cast in darkness, she carefully makes her way off stage to the light emanating from the crack under her dressing room door. I feel like this is a really dramatic moment, right? She was 1 second ago, she was on stage, loving it, soaking it up, soaking her panties.
Oh, jeez.
And then the next second, she's been struck down by God. The room's gone dark and quiet. And you describe this as she makes her way carefully off stage. And I feel like she should be panicked.
Yeah.
The room's pitch black. She should be grasping through the darkness to get out of there.
I mean, I noted this in my initial comments. So during the blind judging, my very first reaction, I said I felt a strong disconnect when she just walks off stage. Is that realistic to just walk away?
Yeah.
And I don't think it is. Like, she's just said, smite me if I'm lying. And then, if nothing else, been embarrassed by what has just happened. And her reaction is to walk carefully off stage. Now, I know she's in crazy high heels, but I agree with you. There's just a disconnect with reality there. Like, what is the real emotional impact of what's just happened? And we're not actually seeing that. And I think that's a problem because, you know, if you lack that emotional resonance, then you're disconnecting from your reader.
And you might say, look, this is a completely unrealistic scenario that's never going to happen. But still, I think you need to have characters that react as they would if that happened.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, for the reader to treat it as a serious situation.
And I wonder if that was there to facilitate the opening of the door prompt, because we need to put that somewhere, and she does open the door of her dressing room and go inside.
Yep.
Now, casting aside the opening of the door prompt, I actually think that moment should happen right there in that scene. And this is advice I would give normally for flash fiction. We don't have enough words to keep changing where we are.
Yeah.
We're in a mega church. We're on stage. Keep the action there. Now, we can black out the whole audience. They've ceased to exist anyway by the sounds of things almost. So St. Peter can just appear in front of her.
Yeah.
And I think that the drama of that is more impactful than if we walk off stage and go into another room. So I think that's an option there. Now, obviously, you'd have to find a different way of working in the opening of the door, but I think, you know.
Well, you've got St. Peter right there, and he has a pretty big door that he's
in charge.
for.
Exactly. So. Yeah, you could work that in. And look, you know, we're not super anal about these prompts.
Yeah.
Like, we'd be happy for you to find a different way to work that in. I do think that keeping it all in that one scene would help with that drama. So just a couple of little minor details, but things that might be useful to Holly and to other listeners. So we've got Paula taps the mic. Hello, her voice drained of the self-righteous fire and brimstone. Now, this is very much a pet peeve of mine as a parent who has read a lot of picture books to her children and, you know, novels as well. We've got, hello, her voice drained of the self-righteous fire and brimstone. In my opinion, and take this with a grain of salt, it is just an opinion, but I would love to see the tone of the voice come before the voice. So there's too many picture books where it's like, hello, she whispered. And I've just gone and said, hello, she whispered. Ah, shit, I didn't whisper hello. And that's coming from the point of reading out loud, but that's how your brain works too, right? Your brain works in logical sequence. So give the brain that necessary information first, in my opinion. Tell us first that her voice is drained of fire and brimstone before you get to hello, so that we can hear it the right way when we first hear it.
Or even better, describe her in a way that you know that she's changed. And then by implication, we know how she's responded.
And I have to say too, like we're saying it's drained of fire and brimstone. I haven't heard any fire and brimstone yet. And I think this is part of that issue that we talked about at the very opening, that she hasn't really said anything too offensive yet. Where's the fire and brimstone? She's saying, I want to bring God back to America or Jesus back to America. That's not fire and brimstone. That's a perfectly reasonable sentiment coming from a pastor of a mega church.
Yeah.
Like that's to be expected. Where is this like, you'll go to hell if, and you'll like, that's the fire and brimstone. And having been raised Catholic in Catholic schools, Catholic church, I can give you fire and brimstone and that ain't it, right? It's like, if you do the slightest thing, you are going to hell. And she hasn't said that yet. So now when you're telling us her voice is drained of fire and brimstone, like that's not my natural reaction to that. So I guess that's a little bit of a challenge. Like it's minor. We're talking flash fiction here. So minor stuff matters, and you really have to be careful with everything that you're communicating. And just another minor point when we talk about the sanctuary, with the sanctuary cast in darkness. Similarly, this setting hasn't been presented like a sanctuary. It's not a quiet, dimly lit church. You know, it's a mega church where people are screaming.
Yeah.
And so when we describe it as a sanctuary that's cast in darkness, that doesn't resonate with me when I'm reading that. So I guess you need to think about either how you might set this up as a sanctuary, or probably more appropriately in the context, think of a different way of making that contrast between this raucous kind of thing and now what's dark and silent, because I'm not quite sure that sanctuary and darkness is the contrast that works here.
Mm. And so she now meets St. Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get into like the main part of the story that you're trying to tell, I guess. So what we had before was the setup.
Yeah.
And now this is the action. It's this conversation with St. Peter where I guess a lot of these ideas come out, and this is what Holly was wanting to write about.
Mm.
And so St. Peter then challenges Paula's idea of God with all of these things like, hey, these people are not white, number one. God is not a man, number two. Like, they're non-binary.
Mm-hmm.
And bringing up all of these ideas of hypocrisy, really, in her behaviour, the not helping the poor and the underprivileged, basically.
Which I think is a compelling idea. And it's probably worth pointing out because maybe there's some assumed knowledge here. But St. Peter is famously in charge of the pearly gates, right? So St. Peter is the one who sort of admits you to heaven or not. So when we see references to St. Peter, that's kind of the implication that he's deciding if you get into heaven or not. So I think that's important context here. That was evident to me, but it might not be evident to other people. But yeah, I think I did have a little bit of a problem with that idea of Paula gasp and St. Peter replies like, not white? Yeah, none of us are kind of thing.
Yeah.
And while I love that as a reference because that is an issue that we see time and again with this sort of white representation of Jesus when we know, in fact, he's Middle Eastern. And while I appreciate that idea, it seemed like a bit of a jump for St. Peter to be like, yeah, not white. Like she hasn't said that yet. She hasn't even implied it. She's just said, but you're like, she could have been saying, but you're an apparition.
Yeah, exactly.
So I found that a little bit jarring, and it's unfortunate because I want that idea to latch onto. Like, I get it. I get what you're saying there, and I really want to support that. But I think within the story, unfortunately, that connection wasn't quite made. I think Paula needed to say something just a little bit more to trigger St. Peter's reaction there of like, yeah, not white.
Yeah,
like you've described him as swarthy, but you haven't sort of shown her reaction to that.
It was the first thing out of her mouth, basically. Like she dies, essentially. She gets smitten by God. Smitten or smited? So God strikes her down and it was a bit of a jump to go from just like dying.
Yeah.
And then to be like, hang on, you're not white.
Which is tough because you're in flash fiction and you're trying to do these things quickly. So I get it all, right? Like I understand how we've ended up here, but it's a challenge. Like I think that you need to think about like how each domino in your story is hitting over the next one kind of thing. And I think there was a missing domino there. What I will say though is that I loved that there was conflict here, right? As soon as he turns up, there's conflict. And that's super important, right? Like we can't just exist in a world where things are happening. Like we need to have this sort of push and pull. And there's plenty of stories that don't do that well. And I think Holly did that really well.
Yeah. All right. So we have this exchange. It culminates in an ending which, as Holly said, it is fairly ambiguous what happens at the end. He presses the button. Paula falls through the floor. Her shriek loud enough to be heard in heaven and earth. Like I was a little bit confused by this ending, I guess, about what specifically has happened because St. Peter has just said we give second chances, essentially. And then she's gone through this trapdoor.
Yeah.
So the implication is that she hasn't been given a second chance. And I'm not really sure what the outcome is there. And it's fine to leave things ambiguous, but I guess when we look at the totality of this story, it works well as this vehicle for like this social commentary right, that happens in the second half. What I'm unsure about is the character of Paula.
Yeah.
And we've set her up as being this selfish mega church pastor. She doesn't repent from her sins in any way. Like she's just like, oh, okay. And then at the end, we're not sure what happens to her.
And her sins largely appear to be that she's called him Big Daddy God.
Yeah. I guess, but they're also
because we haven't been.
There's the hypocrisy there of threatening the eyes on an employee at McDonald's as one example.
Which felt a bit extreme to me. And this idea of the Karen, which I love, by the way, although I have a beautiful friend called Karen, my oldest friend, Karen. And I love that concept. I am one, right? And I'm becoming one more by the day. So that's relatable. But from storytelling point of view, when we just are like, oh, she's a Karen and she threatened to call ICE on employees because her Diet Coke was flat, that's very extreme. Calling her a Karen is a bit of a shortcut. I feel like that's cheating. I feel like, look, don't tell us she's a Karen. That's a conclusion that the reader should be drawing for themselves.
Yeah.
Instead of that, give us what she actually did. And did she actually threaten to call ICE? That's pretty intense, right? So I feel like we need a little bit more realism around what Paula's actually doing to feel that as a reader and to draw our own conclusion about who she is as a person and how potentially hypocritical she is.
And yeah, just in that ending, I loved, again, the setup. I liked the discussion there and the points that were raised, like the social commentary aspect of that interaction was fun. But what I felt this really needed is to drive home that emotional core. Like, I don't really know what Paula wants out of this situation, how she feels. Like, is she's confronted by the fact that, you know, what God is different to what she thought? Is her faith shaken? Is she wanting to be repentant, change her views, or is she sticking to her views? And does she want the second chance? Like, does she just want it just because she doesn't want to go to hell? You know, her response. Not clear. Yeah, her response to being told that she's going to go to hell is, oh, what will my followers think? Which is giving us part of her personality, but at the same time, is that a realistic response that a pastor might have to being told that they're going to hell? Might they be a bit more concerned about like the eternal damnation aspect of it if they're in this situation? So what does that ending tell us about the character? And I'm not really clear.
I think potentially this comes back to how the story was inspired. Now, Holly was feeling a little bit despondent, I think, when she wrote this story and was keen to give that social commentary. And I think the social commentary comes through really strongly. And I think that's a tick in that regard. But if you're presenting Paula as the POV character, like it's her point of view that we're getting, but we're not immersing ourselves in that POV. We're not getting that emotional resonance of what would Paula think? How does Paula feel? In fact, we're just passing judgment on her from above. That feels, unfortunately, a little bit moralistic, and for that reason, not particularly resonant emotionally for me. So I did note that in my initial comments as well. I said this worked as a story and had an interesting idea, but it felt a little preachy itself rather than relying on the story itself to do the talking. And I may agree with what you're preaching. I may be like in the choir, right? But nevertheless, like it comes across a little bit as like passing judgment on Paula and just being like, God is non-binary and, you know, everyone in the Bible is not white and all of these things that are may or may not be true, but doesn't resonate from Paula's perspective as like any kind of learning point or any kind of like change in her that's acknowledged that. It's more just like that's what we're presented with as being fact, and we just have to accept that as readers. And yeah, like I did feel like, for example, when it's presented that God is non-binary, that's fine. You know, that depends very much on your perspective. We don't have any way of verifying that. But like it did feel a little preachy. It felt a little bit like what a right-wing person would criticize a left-wing person for doing, which is like sort of putting this kind of political correctness kind of lens on things. And to me, like that didn't therefore feel resonant. It felt like an agenda that was being pushed more than something that flowed naturally from the story, which, you know, fits because that's pretty much what was going on here. Like Holly wanted to sort of just express herself. She wanted to put out some things that she was feeling, and I did feel those things. So I think that was a success in that regard. In terms of like it being a satisfying story, I mean, I guess advice that you would hear often is like, don't give us a moral. Like nobody wants to read a moral. We've got our fairy tales with their morals and so on, but like typically in a story, you want to make your own conclusions and you want to draw those conclusions from what's happened as opposed to sort of being presented with all the answers as if they're just known fact. Am I getting preachy now?
Yeah. No, good points. Like if God were non-binary, like how do you explain the Bible? And
the
like,
father of Jesus thing.
No, I just mean like, you know, the misogyny and whatnot in the Bible is evidence that God is none of those things. So like, and I would have expected the pastor to
be more of a pick me than a.
No, well, the pastor might have kind of thrown some of that out to challenge God. Like, but you told me in your book, this, and
Daddy,
Big Daddy Jesus, you told me to like hate gay people or whatever. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think like you're right. It's just something that's not there on the page, and like, we're working with 500 words here. We can't answer God and the universe, although plenty of people attempted that in this round with this break the rule write what you know anti-prompt. People are challenging themselves to sort of answer the mysteries of the universe. And of course, we can't do that in 500 words. I guess that's where we come back to from a storytelling perspective. How can you make this more compelling? And I think the way to do that is to look at your character, your point of view character, and bring it all back through that lens of how she's seeing things and how things evolve for her and how she changes or not by the end of the story.
Yeah. But look, I can tell this was a very cathartic piece for Holly to write. And I think that the point of the story was more to get that out. And this is a real like FU to the conservatives, you know, at the end saying, well, you're going to get your comeuppance in the end when you meet your maker kind of situation. So I think that's what Holly was going for. And that's she succeeds there.
Yeah, that's a tick in that regard. I guess I love the voice of this piece. Even, I mean, I didn't do a very good job of representing the voice.
A great voice.
But it was a fun voice. It was a fun character. The premise was great. And there was plenty to chew on here. And it was active throughout, right? Like things are happening, dramatic things. And so tick, tick, tick. Like there's a lot to be said for all of that. And I think Holly's done a great job of all of those things. And so I guess like the question always comes back to, well, then why didn't I make the long list, right? And I think in this case, it really probably came down to that emotional resonance aspect. Like we talked about, hang on, why is she not reacting? Why is she just walking off stage? And when Peter turns up, why is her first reaction, hey, you're not white? Like let's get into the essence of her, Paula. Who is she as a character? And what's her real reaction? And I feel like then that emotional resonance would follow and we would feel more connected to, Holly, your view of the world, to your truth.
Yeah.
Because it's very clear, like your truth is coming through. But I think maybe that disconnect from the character, because she's not you, right? Like she's like the opposite. And maybe you needed to embody her a little bit more to give us that resonance.
That's true. I also think this is one of those stories where you're biting off a lot here. Like you're getting into these discussions of like left versus right and all these political themes are coming into the mix, but you don't have much time to write about them. Like you have enough time to just kind of list them almost.
Yeah.
Right. So if you were to write a much longer piece, that may allow you to get to all these themes, you know, more effectively or more completely. But yeah, for 500 words, it's a real challenge.
All right. So let's just quickly talk about how Holly responded to the prompts. Okay. So we've got the word prompt, ring. Now, Holly used the word bring twice.
Completely transparent, perfectly fine.
Yeah, perfectly fine. And then we've got the action prompt of opening a door. Now, Paula opens a door to her dressing room. And we've talked already about how maybe that all should have been contained within one scene and she not go off stage to open the door.
But can I also say there was an opening of a trapdoor as well
at
the end. So we didn't even need that other scene change, did we?
No, we didn't in hindsight.
Yeah.
That didn't even occur to me. I love a trapdoor. In fact, that might have been a more powerful use of the door because it's a bit different, right, than just opening a door into a room.
Yeah.
It's definitely more pivotal in the plot, so stick with that, I reckon. And then finally, we've talked about it already, but the anti-prompt, write what you know.
But I will say about that one, you know, again, in her brief explanation, Holly mentions, I guess, a few different angles that she's taken here. And this was a challenging anti-prompt because it made you question yourself, I guess, more than anything. Like, have I done enough?
Yeah.
And I think there were a few people who took that approach of, well, I'm not sure if this is enough, so I'm going to do a couple of other things. And Holly's listed three things there that she's done. And again, you only needed to do one of those things really to fulfill the anti-prompt. So maybe not leaving the ending ambiguous would have helped.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've just listed off a range of criticisms here as we walk through this story. But the one is, did you deliver a satisfying story?
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to the climax and ending of the story. And there were a lot this round where it was sort of left a bit more open. It was left for us to question. And if that wasn't supported by the prior story in a way that allowed us to connect those dots, then it wasn't satisfying. It left us with too many questions. And so in this case, Paula falls through the trapdoor. And as Ed indicated before, we're questioning, hang on, didn't St. Peter just say we forgive? And what's happened? Has she gone to hell? That's actually not evident. Like, has she gone to hell, or is this just a theatre thing where she's gone through the floor to some other place in the theatre? We don't actually know any of that stuff. we can only assume. And I think it would have been more satisfying to either see Paula like come to some sort of realization or to have that conflict out with God or St. Peter to say, hang on, like this is very different to what I was told, you know. I guess like we come back to the title again, and I said this in Des's episode last week, that the end should be in the beginning kind of thing. You've set up, okay, this is all about the letter. That's what this is. It's a cease and desist of the big daddy God, right? Like that's what you've set up as your premise. But that's not where we end up in the end. In the end, we're just kind of like, no, you're a hypocrite, goodbye. And I think maybe it would have been more satisfying to come back to that big daddy God thing. Like, does she say that one final time to piss God off to the point where now she's going to hell? Like, what is it that links back to that original premise?
You know what could have been an interesting ending just as you're talking through that, and you definitely didn't have enough words to do this, Holly, but at the end, she goes through the trapdoor and she lands back at the pulpit.
Ooh.
And she has the opportunity to continue her sermon. And then we see what has actually happened.
No, that's really cool. And look, there's many, many ways you could approach this stuff, but I guess the question is, like, how are you delivering the promise of what you set up at the start? But ultimately, like, I had a great time reading this story, both first time I read it and again now reading it on air.
Yeah.
As embarrassing as it might be for me. I hope you enjoyed that, Holly. I know you were setting me up there for a fall. Just on a personal note, I love you. Like, you bring me so much joy, and I really love reading your stories. I love bantering with you online. You're a really fun person, and we're so lucky to have you.
Can you say that again in your Honey Boo Boo accent?
I just love you, Holly. I love you so much, and God bless you, child. Oh, just smite me now.
All right, so thank you, Holly, and we'll be back again next week with another Daredevil, our third Daredevil. And until then, right on.
Right on.
We hope you enjoyed this special Daredevil episode of Not Quite Right. If you have thoughts on this story, follow us on social media and join the conversation. And if you'd like to participate in the next round of the competition, head over to our website at notquiteright.com. That's WRITE.
Something doesn't seem quite right.
What I have to do here is just let go of my ego
Yeah.
and just understand that, like, we're all just specks of dust in the universe. And this speck of dust sucks at accents. All right. It's time we bring Jesus back to this country. Fuck.
That's good. You sound like Honey Boo Boo.
Honey Boo Boo. Boo Boo child. Okay. Fuck.